Welcome to Japan Station. I'm Tony, and
I'm Ryan.
So Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask one question. Today's question is, what was it like in Fukushima during the Tohoku earthquake? So, Ryan, you were in Japan in 2011 when the earthquake happened, right?
Yes, I was.
Okay, me too. But both of us were in the Kansai area, right?
Yeah, surprisingly, we were close to each other.
Yeah, we hadn't even met before, but it wouldn't be until Hawaii that we met. But at the time,
I kept inviting you over, this strange guy, and he just never came.
Yeah, I kept thinking like, who is this guy? Why does he want me to come to his house?
We're gonna be friends someday. Dang it, just come over now.
It's like a time traveling friend. You don't know.
I believe you were in Kobe, right? I was in Osaka.
Exactly. Yeah. So neither of us were in Fukushima, but I did meet someone that was in Fukushima Prefecture. Now he wasn't at the actual like nuclear power plant or anything like that, but he was actually quite close, and he had a very, very just really I don't know, unique experience. Nothing like what Ryan and I had during that time. So he is a writer. His name is Daniel Legary. Did I get that right, Ryan?
I think so.
Okay. I'm sorry, Dad. I keep, for some reason, I have trouble with your last name. Legary. I believe it's Legary.
So now that you did that, we're going to find out it's actually something else.
So Dan's an awesome guy. He's a great writer. He's a translator. I met him through my job at Wasabi Magazine. He's been writing articles and doing translations for us for basically, I think, over 2 years now. And one of the articles that he wrote was about his experiences during the 2011 Tohoku earthquake. And it was such a great article that I wanted to talk to him and have him tell the story, actually talk to me. And so we did an interview, which turned out to be pretty long. So I split it into two parts. So this part that we're going to get to listen to is all about, the actual day of the earthquake and the day or two after it. And then part two is going to be what he did in the week after, which is another whole fascinating experience. And then we're going to come back after the interview and talk about our experiences. Ryan and I will talk about our experiences on that day and the next few days after that. All right. So let's get to it. Here is my talk with Daniel Legary. When were you in Japan? And what part of Japan were you in, Dan?
I was in Japan in 2010, August 2010, to August 2015 in Fukushima.
Yep. Oh, okay. What part of Fukushima?
A little coastal town called Iwaki. So it's on the southeastern end of the province. So just not far from Ibaraki Prefecture.
Okay. So obviously, you were in one of the areas of Japan that felt the actual shaking of the earth, when that day happened.
Oh, yeah.
The most. So could you take us back to that day? Where were you and how did it go?
Yeah, I mean, how could I forget, right?
Yeah.
So it was a Friday. It was Friday, just March 11th. So it was still a little chilly, but it was actually starting to warm up. I remember I'd finished my classes for the day, and I'd actually had a really good day. I thought I had a lot of fun. The students were all, in a good mood. Everyone was looking forward to the weekend. I was supposed to go to a St. Patrick's Day party that weekend. And it was actually the last time that I was going to be at that school this term. So I was... on the couple of hours that I had free to myself, I was working on little thank you gifts gifts, like goodbye, good luck gifts for the graduating, the sixth graders who were going to graduate. So just I made, little drawings, wrote a little something in English and kind of signed my name, just a little something to have for them to have. And I was working on that when my phone started ringing, started making this sound that I'd never heard before. Or I think it went off one time before, but I didn't really hear it because maybe I was in the other room or something. But this time it was right beside me, and I was a little confused because I couldn't remember what the sound was. And it was kind of like this alarm, it just kind of raised as it got louder. So it would kind of go, almost kind of like the alarm on something you'd see in like a space sci-fi movie or show. Like,
right.
Man the battle station.
Yeah.
And so, and my phone at the time this was 2010, so smartphones were just starting to kick off. I didn't have one yet. I still had like the old flip phone. At the time, I wasn't proficient enough in Japanese to know what the kanji that were coming up were. Like I'd opened it up and looked at this long message. So it's like red kanji and then black kanji. But then my principal, who was the only other person in the room, we were in the teacher's room, and he goes like, "Jishin, earthquake?" So I knew what that was, and so I just kind of looked around. Honestly, I was a little confused because nothing happened at first. There was no shaking, but the phone kept ringing, and both him and I just kind of looked at each other. We're looking around like, is this a false alarm or whatever? And then after I'd say 10 to 12 seconds, we heard it before we felt it. It was this deep rumble. And things started shaking a little bit. So it was kind of like this left and right. And I was like, oh, yeah, there it is, And then out of nowhere, it just racked up in intensity. It started going a little shake, a little bit harder. And then there was kind of this jump where there was, it just kind of whipped everything in one direction and then back. So the doors and to the filing cabinets kind of whipped open and closed again. And my desk, all of my drawers whipped out, and all the chairs, got kind of spun out of control. And both my principal and I just got up, and we just got up off our chairs, and he was like, outside. And I was right beside the door. So yeah, I just jumped right outside. And we walked out onto the field. And that's when the whole thing just got to its strongest. And it was strange. It was strange because I'd never felt the ground like it was. It didn't feel solid. It just, like, the floor, the ground is supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to kind of, it's not supposed to feel like wet cardboard.
Right.
And that's kind of like what it felt like. And it felt like you were standing almost like on a mattress that was being thrown in all directions. It shouldn't do that. And I could not stand straight. I had to bend down. I kind of crouch in a crouching position because you would get thrown to the ground. And and that's when I was looking around, and I could see you would hear glass breaking, and you heard just these loud kind of like bangs and cracks and all kinds of manner of things breaking. I could hear the kids in the school, like they were screaming, like they were terrified. So that was scary too. But at the time I didn't feel it. It didn't feel frightening. You go on autopilot, and you just kind of try to assess everything that's happening all at once. So I wasn't really scared. It was more of like just take in information and then deal with it later. And so eventually, after about a minute, even though it felt much longer than that, things died down. Like the rumbling started to slow down and stop. And I looked around, I could see power lines that were basically at like 45-degree angles. There's some debris. One of the biggest things was the roofing tiles off houses, those stone tiles. that kind of had like that roundish shape. A lot of those were like all over the roads. Like they'd all just crumbled right off. And then people, I just kind of went up. Of course, at that time, none of the staff had the time to worry about me. And I wasn't even thinking about it either. It's not like I was like, hey, you know, I just kind of jumped up and said, what can I do? What can I do? And I was like, okay, I just kind of walked around, like, should I be doing something or can I help? But none of the staff would even really acknowledge me. And I went up to one guy and I said, oh, that was a pretty big one, right? And I just kind of was like, so it's how often does this happen? Because I'd never really felt an earthquake that big. I'd felt a tiny one for like a couple of seconds before that. Like it was like, oh, did I actually feel that? Like the first time I was like, oh, I was kind of like, I really wanted to feel it, but I guess I kind of missed it. But he just looked at me and he didn't answer, and his face was just ghost white, like white as a sheet, and he just kind of shook his head like, no. And then he went back to his phone. He was trying to connect, and then I checked my phone. Everything was down. Like there was no service, because obviously all of the power, all of the antennas must have just totally got busted, just destroyed. And so I just kind of helped get the kids together, and I remember my taxi coming to pick me up, because every day a taxi would come and pick us up, and it was, you know, by the time everything was said and done, the taxi had arrived. Like we still had to get home somehow, and the taxi still had to drive me and my friend home. So I
guess you were like up in like a mountain kind of school?
No, it wasn't. That wasn't a mountain school that day. Regardless of how close the schools were, I always had a cab. Like the city paid for cabs.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it was pretty lucky. This was only for the elementary school ALTs, the junior high and high school ones. They had to find their own transport, so they had like their bikes and stuff. But because there were so many elementary schools, they just kind of, you know, they got us a cab, which was nice.
Yeah.
So the cab got there, and I remember having to go back in to get my stuff, because my stuff was in the teacher's room. But that's the thing. Like I was like, my cab's here, like my bag, my computer, like everything's in the thing. Everything's in the teacher's room, and it was right there, like. From the door, you know, you didn't even have to take 2 steps in. That's where my desk was. My desk was right beside the door. But I was still kind of like, okay, get in, get out, because like there was still kind of rumbling, like just very slightly. And aftershocks from that earthquake like continued for the next few hours, almost every few minutes. Yeah, like big and small, like. It was just, you know, they would come and go. Mm-hmm. By the time, 6, 7 p.m. rolled around, they were a little less frequent. But that first hour, it almost felt like one whole earthquake, like for a whole hour, because the big one started and then it was just little rumbles all the time. Would go up and come back down. So I jumped in the teacher's room and grabbed all my stuff like from the desk and got my bag. And I remember looking at the teacher's room, and it was, it looked like a hurricane had just gone through it. The filing cabinets had tipped over. There was stuff everywhere. There was broken glass and shards, and one desk was completely on its side.
Wow.
Like it was shocking. It was just this, whoa, like that was okay. So then I got in the cab, and we drove to pick up the other ALT that lived in the same building as I. He told me he was in the gym at the time for the graduation ceremony, and like the whole gym just felt like it was going to fall apart. Thankfully, it didn't. And he told me that the pool had cracked, so the swimming pool had actually cracked open. And on our way back home, like the roads were just everywhere. Sometimes we had to go around debris or rocks or people. Like the whole city had just was outside. There was not a single person in a building. And yeah, then I got home and turned on the news. I still had power, no water, but power. Turned on the news and we'd see the tsunami hit. That pretty much describes the first couple hours.
Okay. So, I mean, I think by the time you see the news of the tsunami, I think it really starts to sink in, like, this was not just like another ordinary kind of big earthquake. This is like something really significant, right?
That was definitely a get on Skype, call your parents moment. That was because I remember when the tsunami hit, I hadn't gone to the coast. Oh, no, I had. So the coast was only, a 15-minute drive away, the ocean. And I remember watching it and people beside me going like, that's just down the road, right? I didn't go to any of the little villages on the Iwaki coast at that time, but I knew how close it was. And there was a split second in my head that I was like, is that going to reach us here? And people were like, of course not. Like, it's already come and gone. But that fear of like, wait a minute, how close is this, right? Coming in. And of course, it didn't occur to me at the time, just because of everything that was going on, that like this had to be filmed and sent off. And of course, this had already happened. But it was so close to us. So. Sorry, what was the question?
No, that was basically it. Yeah, I mean, when you start seeing those images of the tsunami, you start to realize, like, this is a huge thing. Like, this is a totally, like, country changing kind of, magnitude.
Yeah. At
the moment, maybe perhaps not so much, but like, you start to see those images and you realize, like, this wasn't just a little isolated thing, right?
I can remember when it was that, like, terror actually hit me, and that wasn't until a few days later with the power plant.
Oh, okay.
So, well, then what did you do in the days after the earthquake? Did you think about going home, or were you just staying in your apartment? Like, what did you do? I
actually don't really remember what the Board of Education, so like our bosses at the Board of Education, told us. I think they told us something along the lines of like, you should kind of stick together. I remember them saying, if you want to leave Japan, do it, which was just something that's very uncommon in like the Japanese workforce. Like, just quitting for one and leaving a job is a lot of, red tape and bureaucracy and paperwork and stuff. And they were just like, if you want to go, we get it. No hard feelings. Like, we can figure this out later. And at the time, I was like, I ain't going anywhere, because I'd been wanting to live in Japan again. Like, I'd been to Japan 1 year before that to study as an exchange student. But it was my dream at the time to go and live there, work there, and just kind of start to learn the language and really, do my own thing, rather than live in like a host family and stuff. So I didn't have any plans to go anywhere. And in my head, I remember saying multiple times, well, at least it can't get any worse. And it's something that I don't say anymore, because everything just kept getting worse. So the big earthquake hit, and I remember a few hours later, all the English teachers in our area got together, actually at my house at first. So because that was quite central in the city, everyone was just kind of like, come to Dan's, because everything was very close to me. So I was like, okay, let's just meet up. Like, come on over. We'll make some food. So my place, and the other ALT, he was there. We just kind of like had people over at our two apartments, and we just kind of, did things in both. We just chilled out. And I kept thinking like the big earthquake's done. Like now we'll figure this out. We might get a few weeks, to kind of figure things out, but we'll get back to normal. Like, it'll be fine. And then tsunami hit, and I was like, okay, well, that's not here. Like maybe it's difficult that tsunamis come and gone. We'll assess the damage. What can happen now? Nothing, right? Like the two main design, like unless we get hit by 100 tornadoes or something weird or a meteor strikes. But I'd completely forgotten about the power plant. Like I knew it was there, and I'd actually driven by it a few weeks prior, like a month prior, and like it was just another building on the side. When I drove by it, it was dark, so I couldn't see how close to the ocean it was. I never really thought about it. And then on Monday, up to Monday, we were hanging out together. People were staying at my place. Some other people went back to their apartments, actually. A few people left. Like, it was fine. We just kind of dealt with the aftershocks as they came. And I still wasn't scared or anything. In fact, it taught me a little something about myself and how I deal with stressful situations. Is I try to make light. I try to make light of it. I try to make fun of it. Because usually I'm just so surprised that like it's just like, wow, it's like, are you kidding me right now? This is such a huge thing. And it can lead me to just kind of how I deal with it. It's just kind of being goofy, like kind of being like, oh, that was a big one, like some other people are terrified and I'm just like, all right, earthquake dance or something stupid, But it was on Monday, and when I was at the school, and all of a sudden my teachers bust in not bust in, but a few of them come in, turn the TV on and says, everyone watch. And there's footage of the power plant, 42 kilometers north, exploding. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of looked at it, and immediately my vice principal and principal were like, close all the doors, close all the windows. This was immediate. This wasn't just like another earthquake. This was a bloody nuclear power plant exploding. Yeah. And that's when it sunk, right? Yeah. Because the word radiation. If there's one word in Japanese that I know how to read 100%, that I'll never forget. I could forget everything, but I'll never forget Hoshase or Hoshano. Like it's just too ingrained because that's the only thing that was going around. That was when I was like, this is bad. Like I could, this is not cool, right? What's going to happen? Yeah. And by that point, there was no way out of the city. The buses and trains were out. There was no gas. Gas stations within 24 hours of the earthquake had been completely dried out. Because I remember seeing the lineups, like that night of that Friday and like the next day, people were just lining up, getting gas. And so there was we couldn't really leave. Even Tokyo wasn't that far away, but it was still quite cold. Like we didn't want to panic, never got anybody anywhere, and usually makes things worse. Yeah. So we all went to another friend's apartment, and about 10 to 12 of us who hadn't left kind of stayed in his apartment for the next week. Because after the thing exploded, it was, don't come to school, like stay with your families, stay with your loved ones kind of thing. Like it was, everything was just done. And to think that it actually takes a nuclear power plant exploding to say, don't come to work in Japan is another totally different subject that I could go into a long discussion about. So, but that
definitely, there's plenty to say on that.
Right. Because, I mean, think about it. Yeah. Even after the big earthquake, I was back to work on Monday. Like, the kids weren't there, of course. Like, the kids were at home and some of the families, but it was my duty to go to the school and, help clean up and help, and despite the constant aftershocks happening, like, the number of times I would run in and out of the school during that first weekend, right? But then after the power plant exploded, I remember I lived very close to that school, about a 30-second walk away. Like I was right across the street from it, and I had to cross the field. And that day when it exploded, like I ran as fast as I could home because I didn't know anything about radiation. And it was like the whole air could be irradiated. Like, oh crap! But I gotta run home through this irradiated landscape. Like, I was like, this is not good. So yeah. I think I kind of answered a few different questions there at once.
Hey, so I have a couple of recommendations for you. First of all, if you haven't listened to Ichimon Japan episode 4 yet, well, go do that, because Dan, the guy that you were just listening to, well, he's had a lot of interesting experiences in Japan, including working as a fake priest. So on episode 4 of Ichimon Japan, the question, by the way, is what's it like being a fake priest in Japan? Well, Dan answers that question for us. He talks all about his experiences as a fake priest, how he became one, what that job entails, and he tells a story involving somebody's head catching on fire. So go check that out at japankyo.com/Ichimon Japan. And if you want to learn more about the Tohoku earthquake and the impact that it had on, well, some of the people that lived there, I highly recommend that you check out, well, first of all, check out the book Ghosts of the Tsunami by Richard Lloyd Perry. And if you want to learn more about that book and the incredibly, well, intense story that he tells in it through years of reporting and interviews, well, go check out episode 9 of Japan Station, my other podcast. You can check that out at japanstationpodcast.com. I'll include a link in the show notes. Or, of course, you can just go wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so that is Dan's experience living in Iwaki City. And again, part 2 is coming very soon. So come back for that, because there's just a whole lot more to this story, because the next week that Dan spent in trying to figure out what to do next was just really totally, I don't know, I can't imagine being in this situation. It was really, really interesting in a totally not lighthearted way. It was serious stuff, but definitely worth checking out. So we want to talk about briefly what our experiences were like, because just because you were in Japan, it doesn't mean that you felt the earthquake or that your experiences were anything like Dan's. Ryan, so like we said in the beginning, you were in Osaka, right?
Yes.
So how did it go for you? When did you find out? What did you do?
So I still remember it very well. I actually had the day off work, and one of my friends, another English teacher, American, came to my place, and we had a thing where maybe once a month we would meet up and try to play video games in Japanese for practice. Mm-hmm. And we actually were at a late lunch getting ramen, and I felt the place shaking, but where I lived, it was very subtle, but it lasted a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking, it didn't feel like an earthquake that far away. It just felt like, the best I can describe is I thought I was a little dizzy. Yeah. And then maybe 10 seconds later, my friend said I don't know what's going on, but I feel kind of dizzy. And that made me look around, and the chandelier was rocking, and the broth in my ramen was shaking, and one of the waiters also kind of stumbled a little bit, and oh, I think there's actually a really weird earthquake going on right now. Mm-hmm. Earthquakes were not that rare in Kansai. We'd have them, I don't know, once every couple months, but they'd usually be really small and over in 2 or 3 seconds. This one, I didn't time it, but it felt like it went on for 30 seconds. It felt really long. Yeah. But we thought it was just a weirdly irregular, long, light earthquake. So we didn't think much of it. We went home. And because it was our gaming day, we just continued to play video games. Mm-hmm. Then a few hours later, I got a phone call from my mom, which was extremely rare because we always met online, on Skype if we were talking, that was scheduled through emails and stuff. She never called me directly because just the cost was expensive. Yeah. And she was super panicky, are you okay? Are you okay? What happened? And I was still confused. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm fine. I'm just playing a game with my friend. Wow. And she's like, there's an earthquake. It was huge. And I was like, it wasn't that big. I mean, I felt it, but nothing special. Uh-huh. And then she was like, turn on the TV. And so we turned off the game, put on the news. And then there was coverage of the tidal wave and all the stuff that had happened in Tohoku. And we realized just how big it had been in a different part of Japan. Yeah. As for me, so I was at work that day. I was, that was a Friday, and I was at my elementary school, because the rest of the week, let me see. Yeah, I think the rest of the week I was at the junior high, but Friday was the day I would go to the elementary school. And I'm 99% sure that I was teaching during the earthquake, but nobody felt it, at least not in the classroom where I was.
just did my thing, went back to the staff room, and I believe by the time I got back, there was kind of commotion going on, and people kind of checking the TV or the radio or something, and then I was like, well, what happened? And then I heard, oh, earthquake, and I remember one teacher saying, oh, my son lives in that general area. I don't think he was living in that specific area of like Fukushima, but just roughly in the Tohoku, northeast area. And so, clearly right away I figured, oh, this is like a big deal. This is something, not just a typical little earthquake. But again, I didn't actually feel it. It was later when I talked to other people, other English teachers or probably even Japanese people too, that I heard mention that some places, perhaps like in a taller building in the Kobe area, did feel something, but it was very small. Maybe something like what you felt in Osaka, because Kobe and Osaka are quite close to each other. So, and then I just went home, and it was, just the TV, like the whole weekend, just watching TV. And something particularly memorable about that time after the earthquake is that it was like wall-to-wall coverage, right? Like just nonstop news. And because the advertisers had pulled out, because what I remember hearing is that, they didn't think it appropriate to be advertising during this like, horrible situation. So they started airing the same, maybe like 6 or 7 commercials, which are basically like public service announcements. And they were, I think the organization that ran these, that was responsible for these was, their initials were AC, and I can't remember what the AC is for, but there was this jingle that would end, every commercial would end with this jingle, and it would be AC. So every time the news would go to commercial, it would just be, this commercial jingle, the same jingle. Like you'd probably hear it like 5, 6, 7 times in the same bunch of commercials, just repeating and repeating, and then back to the news, and the situation's getting worse, and then you go back to the commercial and the same commercials, and then you go back to the news, and it's just the same horrible things going on. It was just such a strange time to be watching television. It was just utterly like a really weird period of time. So I checked, and AC is actually AC Japan, Advertising Council Japan. They're a non-profit organization that specializes in public service announcements. And this is that little jingle / audio signature, whatever you want to call it, that I was talking about just a moment ago.
Yeah, it was the news story for months.
Yeah. It just kept going on and on. And I mean, of course, obviously they eventually they just start just airing normal programming, but for I don't know, it must have been a few days. It seemed like it was almost all news on the major television channels.
I mean, it's 9 years later now, and there's still pretty regular news coverage about it every now and then. It's not like daily anymore, but probably at least a couple articles a month.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a whole lot about the recovery, and we can talk a little bit more about that in part 2, because Dan also talked a little bit about that. But what about, did anything, like, did your behavior change? Like, did you, like, go out and, like, buy supplies or anything like that? Because, for example, I remember hearing a lot of foreigners just leaving, but that was, I believe, more in the upper area, like maybe around Tokyo and all that area. Did you see anything going on in Osaka, Ryan?
Not really. I mean, I'm sure there were some people who bought supplies and stuff, but I lived literally like hundreds of miles away. So me and my friends weren't really that concerned about radiation reaching us or anything. Mm-hmm. I do remember certain brands of food and grocery stores that were grown in the area kind of disappeared from shelves.
Right.
But other than that, it was pretty much just life as normal. I mean, it was always in the news, and it was a big conversation topic, and like after disaster, people would be kind of somber and
definitely.
Yeah, but
do you remember going back to work like for the first time?
I think I was between contracts right then, because I think I started again in April, so I had like a couple weeks off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was at a weird job then it was similar to Jet, but done through a private company, and we didn't work during basically all of March because graduation ceremonies and stuff.
Gotcha.
which is why I
Okay.
was off on the Friday.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just kind of on my own or talking with. I was doing like private tutoring on the side, which I still continued,
Mhm.
but nothing really changed that much. Like I said, it was really eye opening to hear Dan's account of all this because
Mhm.
even though it was in the same country where I lived, nothing like what he described happened.
Right. Yeah. Um, so the first day that I went back was a Monday because I was working on JET. You know, I was an ALT, assistant language teacher, English teacher, whatever you want to call it. And so I remember the only thing I remember about that day was it did feel rather awkward. Like it's like, okay, so are we just supposed to go on like business as usual? And then every Monday morning, the principal gives a like a speech, like a little lecture in the school yard, right? In the groundo, they call it the groundo. It's the big open area where they go for recess and PE, and so all the kids line up, and then the principal will usually tell some kind of parable, some kind of story to, teach the kids about something. And I remember just standing out there with the other ALT that worked, another I think she was from Colorado, and we're just standing there, and I just feel like I don't know, like, am I supposed to say something? Am I supposed to just like go on and like not like nothing ever happened? It just felt really weird to be there like on that Monday. But as far as I can remember, we just went on like usual because in that area it didn't really do anything significant, right? Like it was just like watching the news. You could see what was happening, but it wasn't directly affecting us there.
Yeah, I think that's just how. I mean, you feel kind of a sense of guilt, I guess, that you're not doing
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah.
But I guess that's just what happens because big topic shift. But when September 11th also happened, I was living in California, which is very, very
Yeah.
far from New York. And of
Yeah.
course, that was huge news.
Yeah.
But my school just continued like normal, and everyone was just like, "This is weird. Should we be doing this?" And the teacher's like, "Why not?" I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and in that moment, there really isn't anything you can do. I
Yeah.
remember like some parents came to pick up their kids. Uh, quite a few actually, I think, came to pick up their kids, but really, there was obviously, there was no effect on. I was in Florida, and there was nothing that happened in Florida, so it's really just an abundance of caution. But ultimately, there's really nothing you can do in a situation like that. You can just, I guess, go on like nothing happened, and then if you want to volunteer, like many people did volunteer later on, you can do that. But at that exact moment, the best you can do is to just go on with your work or whatever it is you're doing, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of an
All right.
awkward feeling. I hope the viewers never have to experience.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so part two is also super, super interesting. In some ways, it's almost more interesting because you deal with, when we leave off in this story, we didn't really get into the whole radiation thing, another huge aspect of the story, and Dan discusses that and what he and other English teachers in the area did. So come back for that, part two. And with that, we'll say see you then.
See you then.